I'm posting it on Facebook right now too, so people can contribute.
Oh yeah, also on Facebook, just so you know. But as I mentioned, tonight's our first curator conversation. This is a monthly series where we'll ask a local curator or arts organizer to pick an artist or two that they enjoy chatting with. You'll hear all about their work, and it'll also give you a chance to learn more about the absolutely incredible arts community that we have here in the city of Chicago. We're kicking this very first one off with Jefferson Godard, Jean Alexander Frater, and Derek Woods Morrow, who I'm so excited to see all together in one space, and I miss seeing out and about in the real world. But be sure to keep an eye on the chat box throughout the conversation. I'll be dropping links in there to the artist's work, and of course, feel free to pop any questions that you might have in there as well. And with that, that's all from me. So I'll turn it over to Jefferson.
Thank you so much, Adia. First of all, I just want to say this is a wonderful opportunity in that I do speak with Derek and Jean regularly, but and I have spoken with Adia. I've had the pleasure of speaking with you this year as well in preparation for this talk, but we don't get to see each other as much. So it's great to have this connection, and the spirit of even before this just was a wonderful moment that we almost got started before we even got started. I've had the pleasure of knowing Jean and Derek for a number of years and in different ways. But what I want to focus on tonight is my professional affiliations with them with Aspect Ratio Gallery, where they've been gracious enough to allow me to include them in solo and group exhibitions. So that's been exciting. Derek's right now it just closed last week, part of Fever Dream. And Jean's most recent show was Out of My Head at the gallery last year. Just to give you a little context of both of them, I want to give you a few bios from their work. So Jean Alexander Frater was born in Arizona and is a Chicago-based artist whose painting practice has deep roots in her sculptural background. Alexander Frater experiments with materials that are inherent to painting and then integrates other histories, traditions, and languages into this form. Ian Behar, who's a new curator at the DePaul Art Museum, writes, Frater's surfaces invite for both a contemplative passivity and a performative enactment, bolting the viewer to the work as if the encounter were to engender a state of radical flux. Jean received her MFA from the School of the Art Institute and her bachelor's in philosophy from the University of Dayton, Ohio. Her work has been included internationally in venues such as the Wexner Center for the Arts, El Museo Cultural de Santa Fe, the Havana Biennial, the Kulturhuset in Stockholm, Sweden, Aspect Ratio, and the Mission in Chicago. Aside from her practice, Jean runs a not-for-profit space called Material Exhibitions, which is actually run out of her studio, which she shares with two other artists who are actually in the audience right now. And in fact, Adia, our host, has curated an exhibition with Anika Kai at Material. I believe it was 2 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. So it's great to have you here, Jean. And as well, Derek. Derek is originally from North Carolina, Orleans. Woods Morrow's work is a mediation on deviation and disruption, on language and representation, on growing up in the American South. Derek Woods Morrow's questions the performance of the self untethered from expectation, both in his art and his life, a new ideal of intimacy where darkness liberates us and blackness is inherently queer. Alyssa Swindell writes, eschewing medium specificity, Woods Morrow is a visual artist in a broad sense and has been learning new skills to expand his practice. And despite being recognized by the arts establishment, Woods Morrow said he did not see himself as an artist until recently. This article is a couple of years old, but it shows his humbleness. His work has been shown at venues including the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Kunsthal Kade in Amersfoort, Netherlands, the Smart Museum, MCA, Artadia Expo, and Aspect Ratio, all in Chicago. The first thing, there's so many similarities, which is why I chose you both, overlapping with your work and your practices. I guess to start with, you're both really tall people. Derek, you're 6'5", and Jean, you're 5'10". So you both, and you're both endearing people. I mean, obviously I wouldn't have invited you here, right? But you're both lovely people. And I want to get started with where you first met. Actually, I met Derek actually through Bolt, and Jean met Derek through Bolt. But I'm curious, since you both met in Bolt, and just for those of you that don't know, Bolt is an artist residency here in Chicago that's hosted by the Chicago Artist Coalition. It's not a live-in residency. It's a residency where artists go during the day, and they have a studio. It's partially funded. Now it's fully funded. I think when you both went, you had to pay a stipend to go. But it's a wonderful part of the community here in Chicago. So with that said, I want to know what kind of things gelled, how it was meeting each other.
Jean, you go first.
Oh, well, Derek is great at making impressions, of course. I mean, I think I'll just first start talking about Bolt. I mean, the one thing about that residency program that I did love is that it isn't like going away. I have like a pretty regular studio practice where I go kind of Monday through Friday, like a 9-to-5 job. And so I could kind of fit that into my life, and it was just a location thing. In terms of like the pragmatics of going to a residency with a family, is not as easy for me. But so I thought it was just going to be kind of another studio situation. But it was so much more than that. I mean, I look back at that time, and even while I was in it, really, I mean, to be a part like of all of the other artists that were a part of it, and just everyone was attacking their practice with such seriousness and care and love, and each other in that same way. And we were all in a basement of this building, and we just produced and talked and ate, and so that was my just general impression of Bolt. I don't know, Derek, do you want to talk about just that part of it?
Yeah, we were in a great cohort, right? And like Oscar's here, Ben is here, right?
Oh,
On the Zoom, and these are some of the bonds I think I'll keep for life in a way. And if nothing else, I will basically, Google these people randomly. So, you're always sort of attentive to the people who sort of brought you joy in a way. I do hope, and I said this when I was applying to the residency, I said, I really want to look for a family, and it can't be all SAIC people. And I remember Oscar's work was very like anti-SAIC, which I really appreciated, and there, I was like, can we build a family that is away from grad school? Because I'd pretty much just gotten out. I'd been out for maybe 1.5 years, 2 years, and I felt like I needed a community around me of different thinkers. And so when I talked to Teresa, I was like, can I be surrounded by dope ass people that aren't going to give me the same grad school critique I got in grad school, which I really struggle with still. Like I still talk about that in studio visits, and maybe I shouldn't, but that lasting impression that grad school can live, that school can leave on you is really long lasting. And I'm kind of finally in my work starting to break away from some of those things. And I will say that Bolt was maybe the start of being able to break away from a lot of those things. And it was with people who I felt actually were willing to have the dialogues that I probably couldn't get in grad school. And that's mostly because y'all had lived experiences. Like you were a mother with children, like working your ass off in all these different directions. And yet you would come in and we would actually be able to have deep dialogues about things that like people I felt like in grad school were not able to have. So I appreciate you, Jean, endlessly.
Likewise. No, I agree with that relationship to grad school. I mean, I joined Bolt 10 years after grad school. And, it does, like you said, that experience, like, is it was a different one than grad school. First of all, because you're not situated in a department that, everyone's kind of like in a sculpture department or a painting department. It was really completely multidisciplinary, and people were coming at their practice, like I said, with really like a different kind of seriousness that didn't have to be around like the crit, so that the crit actually happened very naturally. And it's a way that we were able to communicate and talk about, what we cared about. And yeah, it's a total family. I'm now, like, as Jefferson said, Benjamin is sharing the studio space behind me, and Nancy, who also is in our studio space, was prior to me going to Bolt. So it's nice, how those connections can form. And right, yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I had a Derek actually took over a part of the, like, a little interstitial space in the front that he had to crouch and go behind to see a drawing that he ended up incorporating into his solo show at the Bolt. So also I should mention that the Bolt residency actually includes a solo show. So within that year or after, each artist gets now it's actually, I think it's 5 weeks, but when you guys did it, I think it was 3 weeks. You were part of the beta testing. You were tested before they actually, it's now in a new space. It's run by Teresa Silva, and still doing very well here in Chicago. So for those of you in Chicago, you should definitely check out CAC. I want to jump in here also to talk about both of your practices. And one of the overlaps that I really appreciate about both of your works and both of the way that you both work is that you both engage not necessarily chance operations, but you allow for, chance operations in the sense that you both use performance, right, in your work, but you allow for discourse in regarding to experimentation, multidisciplinary, and also the idea of play. So I really like the idea that playfulness, and I guess I need to contextualize the fact that Derek's work with play, at least with our show that we had 2 years ago with Laura Davis, Thanks for Not Breeding at Aspect Ratio, was a more ostensible active play, and we can get into that later. But I'm curious as to how you both see the idea of experimentation and play, and even, say, chance operations and performative aspects in your work.
For me, it's a lot about breaking the intentionality complex that I think I learned in grad school, which was like, you must know what you're going to make before you make it, or it must have like some conceptual background to it. And so you got to make this thing. And I think that's really like I don't want to say like being in jail, actually. It's really like, it builds walls to what your practice can be. And I felt like even in my photographs, I was sort of limiting what they could be. And I struggled with that too. I struggled with limiting myself. And I felt limited by my race. I felt limited by my queerness. And so I decided to like stop feeling limited for a little bit. And it was like, well, if you want to make performance, like make performance. And if you want to make sculpture, like make sculpture, or film. And why not, And I had asked why for so long that I started asking why not instead. And that sort of happened really 2 or 3 years ago in my practice. And it felt really important to bring in some of the things like, the structures I'm talking about are walls I put up as an adult or as an artist now, right? Someone who came out of a photography program. As a child, I didn't have those types of walls. I was like, I could endlessly become anything. I could imagine myself this thing, and I had imaginary creatures who felt the same way as me, and they had all sorts of different forms that didn't have genders, right? And I didn't have the language for that I have now, but I can look back on it and go like, I could have been any type of thing I wanted to be. So in my work, I'm oftentimes allowing myself to believe I'm that child or believe I'm in that time period, because I don't oftentimes when I'm walking down the street get to forget that I'm a 6'5" Black person in the world, right? And I don't even say queer person because I'm cis, right? In general, just a slur or not, like I think I code very masculine. I come from a college basketball background, and for a long time I would use those codes in my work. And so I do think that when people see me first, and and we talked about this at Aspect Ratio recently, like, I don't know that I mentioned it, but the one time that I was held at gunpoint in a back alley in Chicago at Big Chicks, I kind of got out of that situation by leaving a gay bar and mentioning that I was leaving a gay bar. Like, you don't want to kill the double minority, you know what I'm saying? So there's a way in which, in this performance of identity, that we're always negotiating these pieces of ourselves, and then we compartmentalize them and we hide them. And so much of my work is like the freedom to play in all of it. If I want to be queer here, I can be queer here. If I want to be Black here, I can be Black here. If I want to talk about whiteness over here, I talk about it. If I want to talk about Blackness, I talk about it. And I think that's the way I've been trying to really approach just making material. Not even like the sitting down and developing like a photograph, but just like the experience of spending time with Black people, or thinking about, like, all of the things I'm thinking about. It's really about a playful gesture of intentionality, but not this like heavy must create this thing, and just kind of trying to be present and exist, knowing that, at least now I know I can be anything I want to be, even if the world may tell me that I can't.
Wow. That's really, and I think also and I'd love to hear your feedback on Derek, Jean, but also I know that gender and challenging gendered norms, especially within your practice or as part of your practice, is part of some series in your work. So, but also, how do you think of play in regards to continuing this dialogue?
For me?
No, for Jean. I'm sorry, for Jean.
Oh, well, I responded to a couple things that you said. One is like the way that you think about limits, and how I think about those things too, and think about play. And I mean, the way that I deal with, I have limited my materials to canvas, paint, and stretcher bars essentially. And those limitations have to do with the materials that I use, but yet there's so much decision making that can go into, I can preference one material over another instead of always preferencing like paint or the gesture or whatever. I can preference, the canvas and the material of, and play with that material in a kind of conversation or reciprocity. I mean, the way that I deal with the materials that I'm working with is incredibly direct. It's very physical. And it's also, like I said, reciprocal. Like I expect it to there's experimentation. So I'm kind of learning from it as I'm going. It's almost like playing an instrument in a way, so that you have an expectation of the kind of sound that you're going to get, or the, whatever is going to happen, but being open to that. So when I say like the decisions, I think it's a big decision to say that I'll preference like the canvas over the paint, because it becomes a different kind of performance with it. And then it changes what the outcome is. And painting itself is such a rich history. So you have all of these within those limitations, you just have all of these ideas and forms that you can like pull out. So if you tear something, that's like a kind of destructiveness. And it sort of, I think in the end, it sits with the material and you understand that that's destruction. And then weaving is a kind of care, or folding is a kind of care. And so those performances that you have with that material rest within the object, that it's not just about, it can include gesture and it can include the mark making, but it's not, it's more, that kind of playfulness and experimentation leaves it open to, these other kinds of reads that's like maybe more inclusive or something.
Yeah, I like the, go on, Derek, sorry.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting hearing you talk about like damage done to a thing.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that like oftentimes through the gaze, but it's also because like my general gaze is one that is like really earnest and honest, regardless if people believe it or not. And so I'm
Mhm.
always thinking about like, if I, like, what damage can accidentally be done even if I am intentional, right? Like,
Mhm.
there are moments in which I unintentionally, like, don't put women first, right? Like, there are ways in which, like, we live in a misogynist world, and so I do things from this body that I inhabit that seem like really not cool. And I tell myself in the process of making, like, in the performance at aspect ratio, if I'm using bodies that are not my own, how can I give them more agency to embody a form or a space where it's not just my direction being applied to them as like a cis queer person? Because I do think my queerness is something that, like, develops the family
Mhm.
relationship, but
Mhm.
there is something about, like, I don't know, the thoughtful artist oftentimes trying to mediate the damage done to the
Mhm.
whatever the plane is, and
Mhm.
how that is like wrapped up in the work somehow. And I think, I don't know, because you're a sweetheart, like, there are ways in which I'm sure you're like, you're daintier in some motions, and then other motions you're just like ripping shit apart, you know?
Well, right. I mean, there is like, I mean, you got all these people who've had to share studios with me. I like love sharing studios with people, but there's so much, like, you know, the physical act of like just, you know, of ripping these things. It's noisy, it's loud, it's something that people around me have to contend with. It doesn't sound nice. But like, I like what you're saying about what you do to that object. I mean, I think that there's like when I'm, you know, it's something to think about. I mean, it's something to think about, like stretching a canvas taut over a frame, right? Like, in, you know, if you act in a way, it's like, if you think of that action of like that bonding, you know, like that wrapping and that just that tautness, like I think about ballerina shoes or like women binding their feet or something. So there's something that's happening when you're, you know, when you're pulling or tearing or whatever, that you know, that stays on that object, hopefully.
I do want to say, I know you want to say something, Jefferson. I don't mean to cut you off. I want to respond to that one more time and just say, what you physically do, I'm oftentimes navigating through not the, yeah, like through a medium that is like really flat. Like, painting is flat, but you're making it a three-dimensional object because like you're literally tearing things. I'm
Mhm.
still working in film and photography a lot. And so that sort of like damage or undulation, I oftentimes think, and I've said this a lot recently in studio visits, I think of like the conceptual framework of the things I try to accomplish in the work as a lot like an orgasm. Like,
Mhm.
it expands and then it compresses and it reduces and then it expands and it compresses and it reduces. And at the end, the only thing I'm denying is the actual orgasm. Because oftentimes
Mhm.
the work that I
Mhm.
create, it's not like a punctuation. It is still like the meditation spot of navigating the orgasm. And so there's this thing here where I feel like you're like materially like ripping and doing something physical. And I'm oftentimes, and not that you're not doing this, but that like in the concept of the piece that I'm doing is the type of damage and softness and
Mhm. Mhm.
on like a flat plane.
Yeah, and but I will say that like painting, I think um I don't think of painting, any painting, as flat anymore. I mean, I just don't, because I think that our time sees things differently than it did, say, 30 years ago. So it's almost as if all painting is a kind of real thing. I mean, it is an object in the world. You know, I'm not, you know, people talk about painting as being a window and so forth. And I think that that, you know, still can be true and it's a story or whatever. But I mean, it's also just very direct in terms of like having to deal with an object. Or you know, it can be, and that's the kind of painting that I'm interested in, I think. um, and so yeah, just to just reflect on that for a second, but that's it.
Yeah, Dia posted some links here. I definitely encourage you to check them out, to look at them real quick, because you'll see some of the works that we're talking about, that Jean and Derek are both talking about. And one of the ones that I want to allude to with Derek, as far as real experimentation and actually almost failure, were the Parian works that we showed together. That you showed a few with, you know, with the show with Laura Davis. Thanks for Not Breeding. I put a link to that show up here as well. you know, which basically, and I'm going to let you talk about it more, of course, but, you know, these works, as with Jean's woven canvases that, you know, another staple and they might come apart, but the Perrienware works that you're refiring these porcelain and clay objects that were fired over 100 years ago at who knows what temperature. And the notion of refiring something when you don't know, which you've educated me on, by the way, Derek, thank you, was that it can explode. You know, it has a propensity to explode. So what was this experience? And also I need to mention that, or to echo what Derek told me before with the work that the Perrienware, the work that Adia posted there is, it's a jug that has this very almost bucolic like scene of, you know, boys climbing next to this very racist object, you know, that of a mammy figure, if you will, that and that and that what Derek's, well, I'll let you talk about it, Derek.
Yeah, that, I mean, I don't know where to start here. I'll start with photography used to be really romantic for me, and it's like not as much anymore. And sometimes it is, but not as much as it used to be. And so it's not romantic, I think, again, because of the walls I put up or the expectations I put up on the photograph. And it's failures. And so what happened was I really felt like the material I was using in any work I was making was trying to have a dialogue, and it didn't have to be a photograph. So I would start playing with performance, or start playing with ceramic. And when I naturally, I didn't even really mean to say that, play with, because like photography is like not playful for me in so many ways. Like I may photograph playful things happening, but it feels really stringent. Like I feel like I know how to take a good photograph. I know, and it feels sterile in a way, and I'm trying to like keep making it less sterile. With other materials, I feel like the world is endless. Like I can just put my hands in the sand and like throw stuff at these Perrier jugs and go, I don't know what's going to come out of the kiln. You know, I have no idea what's going to happen, but there's this sort of like magical intentionality in it. You know, I'm the Perrienware, which is linked to sort of French leisure scenes, which of course don't contain Black folks, is, you know, like ancient, like 19th, well, not ancient, but 19th century, right? And there's something of glazing them in like a playful gesture that contains material from my childhood. And so these are, they're often glazed in like red clay that's actually dug up from my childhood playground. So I'm reglazing these like histories in actual material that I played in as a child. And I'm also not asking them to be perfect. Actually, the imperfection is sort of maybe the lack of translation, you know, between times. And so what you get is you get what looks like dripping or miscoating or all of the fun things that as a kid when you like painted with your hands. But it feels really intentional, in my opinion. Like when I look at them, they feel so intentional because I think the intentionality was to play. It was to actually give myself the space to really like meditate in the process on like these white, both conceptually, literally, and like historically from like a white supremacist standpoint, jugs, and also cover them as white objects because they're literally white with some type of historical structure for play, and also embody that during the process, and do the same thing for a caricature of like a Black object, and see how each of those objects resist or take on whatever I'm putting on it, and accept it. And there's plenty of them that failed. Like I brought a bunch of them to Jefferson's and we decided to show 2 of them, you know, because a lot of them just weren't like aesthetically pleasing to like even me. And so maybe they should be shown anyway, you know, like somewhere. Or do I need to reglaze them? I don't know. You know, I'm not in the studio in Chicago right now. So when I get back in 2 more months, I'll go and I'll probably go back in there. But I don't know, they feel, in a lot of the work that I make away from photography feels mostly open to me. It feels like it asks to be filled with something I can give. And I feel behind the photograph in a way that I feel inside of the jugs or inside of the performance. Sorry, I ranted, but
No,
that's how I
no,
feel.
actually, I'm curious, and I don't know if you need a prompt here, Gene, but I think gravity for you is something, I don't know if you want to go in a different direction, but for me seeing your work, gravity is one of those things, but please.
No, I mean, I respond very much to that idea about, the idea of play and where, what is happening when you're, in the act of playing with something, and then, how you can be present with that. And then, but then also, this really closed system where you've decided what it's already going to be before it happens. And so I think like it's interesting that decision making that you made when you were working with objects that you were playing with, and that you found that, because I think it is important to find like joy while you're actually making work. I mean, I think that that's important as well, but that you made a decision afterwards that one or two were more successful than the other, and I'm interested in that, when that, why and when that happens, and it does happen. And, so I don't know what I'm thinking in terms of gravity so much, although I do use that in my work, but I was thinking more about the Out of My Head show that I had at Aspect Ratio, and how there was a lot of that kind of, and it was kind of a return back to traditional painting in a weird way for me, because I just like switched the preference back to when, the timeline of how I apply paint and when I apply paint. And then, playing with that form, but then in that way also playing with how gravity works on the object, and how it can also, it becomes like, then the thing becomes like, in the sense of the Out of the Head show, it was like I was making these bodily forms, and so when I made a cut, it was like making a line, and then that was also this material that was, folded over, maybe like an elbow or a sagging gut or like something, and then to recognize that all in the zone of what I would call play, or like in joy, or whatever it is that you can it's a real just like interesting place that you can be in as an artist. I mean, it's very pleasurable, but it's also, you fight with it, but there is, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, but I think there's something really important about, letting yourself get out of that place where it's so tight and the decisions become more important than the act or something. Like there has to be, does that make sense? There has to be.
Completely.
Absolutely makes sense.
So, of course, we want to hear about what you're doing in the future, and I want to leave a couple minutes for that. But I would love to, please send us questions. Thank you, Adia. What I would also, community is a huge aspect of both of your works. As you both mentioned before the talk tonight, you can see this photo that I'm referring to. The title is Hannah. Well, the title starts with Hannah. I'm forgetting the whole title, but that photograph of Kendra, they're the main, the performer inside of this photograph, and with Jean's Out of My Head works, but also with Jean running material, sharing her space, and Derek, you're returning to New Orleans again, and your residency at Fire Island, which I think had a big impact on you. And I say big impact, not in the sense of you, in the way that you work, you allow your subjects and your work to be collaborators at the same time, which I find extremely fascinating, because you still are able to convey things in your work without losing hold of your practice, without losing hold of what's happening, but still allowing for there to be a collaborative nature. So it's not necessarily an autonomy. And then with Jean, well, going back to the out of my head, but I guess at first I'd love to hear how you both feel about collaboration, what that means to you, how it informs your practice. I guess we'll start with Jean, because we started with Derek last time.
Okay, well, yeah. So beyond collaborating with material and so forth, I also work with different people who do commissions and stuff. And so you know, I love doing commissions, because a lot of times they'll be like, oh, I want a certain color, and I'm like, well, I kind of love all colors, so we'll see what we can do. It feels like, in collaborative work, it feels like you're kind of in a band instead of like a solo artist. Like you're, you know, it's exciting. I mean, different ideas are being brought up, and you know, I feel like they're already on board. So in some kind of way, whatever it is that they can bring to it can push the work. You know, it has the potential to push the work. So in that way, I like working collaboratively. And also I like working collaboratively, like within a space, or, you know, within like the architecture or something like that. That's a different kind of collaboration, I think, that with the paintings. So.
And yeah, go ahead, please.
From a pragmatic standpoint, like I collaborate with friends because I don't have a lot of money, you know, and that's also something that's really kind of great for me. It's also horrible because like we yell at each other, you know, because I can be really hard to like please, you know, and sometimes I have to just like put that at bay. And it's just a reminder to myself that like I am in a community, and like people are also in many ways doing me favors, or we're creating space for each other to try to get ideas out. And I have to like remember that sometimes. And I think collaboration really helps put me in that space. I also think about like very heavily in my practice, co-performance. E. Patrick Johnson talks about like ethnographical co-performance as a way of thinking about the person who has the agency, and like the idea shouldn't solely hold the right to develop the work. So like I'm thinking about Sweet Tea particularly because I'm revisiting this book performance film, Sweet Tea by E. Patrick Johnson. And it's this project in which he like reconnects with Black queer men in the South. And there's a way in which like the researcher or the person who brings the recorder, the journalist, and puts it down on a table becomes the person in the power in that situation. And E. Patrick is really, I think, navigating what it means to try not to be the person in power, but to actually validate each other in questions that come up in conversation. So one of the failures, you know, in the work I was doing is I would come and ask questions versus sort of what I think I will do moving forward in the work that I am making in the South is I will prompt folks with, you know, these are some of the topics I'm thinking about. Can you tell me your story? Right, that's a different way of just asking sterile questions to get answers that you've already predicted. And I think I in the first month I did that a lot, and I realized there was something missing. And so I think like by doing that, I begin to also perform, and there will be an element of that being a part of the piece where I am sort of also writing about each of these situations, and I will ask someone else, maybe one of the men or queer folks who I've met, to perform my writings about other queer folks, because it begins to question like what is the performance and what is real, and like it's all real and it's all fake, like it's all reality and it's all construction at the same time. Like people do get hurt by ideas of capitalism. Like people try to say like capitalism is a term, like no, it like destroys lives, right? And so yeah, sure, like there's implications to these overarching ideas that we talk about a lot in grad school. I mean, we often talk about them in the meta, but we don't go and visit the community that are really affected by the thing that we talked about in the meta. So like sitting here in the South, in the hood, having intimate ass conversations with, you know, just Black folks is great. And it's scary and it's thrilling, and it's scary because it's intimate. It's scary because it's COVID. It's scary because I don't live like normally in the hood, but I have, you know, and and it's like, okay, well, now you're back in this situation where you are having to navigate excitement. And that excitement has been really good for me, you know, and I think it makes me really think about performance.
Mm-hmm.
a lot, and what it means to be in a collaborative effort of knowledge gaining and development of some type of identity formation, even in my 30s. That's not like, I think people like try to get it. Like they're like, oh, okay, like now I'm gay, now I'm this. And I'm like, nah, now I'm just like a person in the world who has more questions. Like I need to know more about myself, you know? And I need to also know that like 2 years ago, I didn't like this thing, this food, this sexual act, this person. And I'm okay interrogating if that has changed in a few years with other people at the same time. And that has been really the most generative part of being in New Orleans and doing that with Black people who, if anything, we have, you know, we do have race and we tend to have sexuality in common, but it's all, everyone is navigating this shit very different than I navigated in Chicago. And it's not for me to say that they're navigating it wrong. It's for me to just like develop dialogue between us and see what comes of it as material.
Do you feel like the 4 months, with that said, do you feel like the 4 months that you're going to be there, do you think you're going to have enough time? Are you having to push things a little bit to get responses from people? Or are you still able to get that in the limited amount of time that you have there?
I'm not really, I think historically I'm someone, again, who's like a little overly ambitious and tries to put like a lot on a plate in a short amount of time. And that has been really like the downfall of my mental health. So I'm not trying to do that here. You know, like what comes about in 4 months will come about in 4 months. I'm intentionally trying to meet people and trying to make this work. If you have friends, please have them email me or contact Jefferson or Gina or Dia that live in New Orleans who may just want to talk to me for 15, 20 minutes. I'm not expecting people to give me gold material so that I can make this major art piece. I think some of it is just me trying to navigate my life and trying to, I thought about a lot of how a lot of Black folks flee the South and go north, and the sort of trivial empirical way that we often talk about that is like, you know, you stepped up, or you you know, like you come back with a white boyfriend, and so now you've like in a job and you got college education and all this shit, and you like improved yourself. And I'm really questioning if I'm actually directly questioning if that is real at all. And so by returning to the South, it's sort of like endarkenment, like versus enlightenment. It's like, I'm gonna go back to sort of where I was raised, but someplace a little bit more open than even that, and like dialogue with Black folks and see like what that feels like to be next to like Black bodies. And I have plenty of Black art friends, but this is like a culture immersed in like darkness. And so I'm just trying to be here. So Jefferson, I think that's a valid question, and I'm trying my hardest not to try to like produce a thing in 4 months. I hope to come back. I was gonna move here before the pandemic. It didn't happen. Like I'm really thankful for the 4 months I'm here. It was just 2 months, and then another foundation said they'll put me up for another month and a half. So now I'm here till April. I'm just trying to take it one day at a time.
And then that leads me, go on, Jean, please.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, like hearing you talk about the situation, and I mean, one of the things that I admire so much about your work and you, Derek, is like the at risk. You know, you just such a curiosity and such a care that, you know, you can put it all up, you know, just kind of risk it all because you care so much, right? Like it's an, you know, and it is the artist's position, like you were talking about, that you're the position of power and what you're implicated in when you're making this kind of work. I mean, from my perspective, like the most challenging and risky work that I can make is when I, you know, try to keep a painting from destroying itself. I mean, in that way, I mean, it seems kind of light in comparison because it's not, you know, it's really just, you know, just a painting. But, you know, still in the studio, that's how I feel at the most, at the highest risk, when I can like doubt it all. And I just am so impressed by like what, not doubt it all, but like perform it in a way that I can get it out of its existence or take it out of its place or something, or make it fall or whatever it is. I see you're reacting.
Yeah,
Well, I don't want to take. Go on, Derek. Go ahead. Sorry.
And I'm talking in a comparative way, in like a one-to-one kind of way. I'm just saying that, that's my sort of reference point to what I see as like a larger and not larger, but a different kind of like a whole thing that you're doing when you go into these residencies. And really, I don't know, I'm full of admiration for your work, Derek.
Well, I just want to quickly add, and I don't want this to sound patronizing at all, but having known Jean for 14 years now, and Jean graciously allowed my gallery to be part of her studio space. I remember Jean having two young twins that are now teenagers and having this very limited amount of time in which to work in the studio while taking care of a dog at the same time. And you're making your own stretcher bars, you're making the canvases, you're trying to, have this very limited amount of time. So struggle was very much a part of your practice, at least at that time. I just want to quickly say that. We got a question that came in, but before we get to that question, I want to quickly, we got a couple questions come in. So just very quickly, I just want to recognize the fact, because where do we go from here, right? So Derek is currently in New Orleans. He'll be going to Bemis in Nebraska over the summer. And in the fall, he will travel to Woodstock, New York, and go to a residency, both are residencies at the Center for Photography. Is there anything else that you would like to disclose of what's upcoming for you, Derek?
Yeah, there are a few shows, but I can't really say anything yet.
Okay.
Say, like, Jean, I really admire you, and I want to say that, like, living in America, like, living is risky, like, life is trauma, and so, like, I don't ever want you to remove, like, you definitely, there are some privileges, but, like, I have some privileges too from an institutional standpoint, and, like, to exist in the world is trauma. So even for you, and I don't know how much of your practice is holistic, but, like, for you to occupy some of your economy of time with painting in any type of way in your life is risky in some direction by denying something else, right? So I don't ever want you to, like, to sell yourself short on that.
No, I appreciate that. I wasn't trying to, I was just so moved by what you were saying.
Thank you.
So anyway.
I adore you, and I just, like, don't ever want.
We just have to make sure that there's equity here, okay? That's all I want to maintain. So Jean has a solo show coming up at Aspect Ratio in September, and a fabulous interview in which magazine? I forgot the magazine. Pardon me. Jean, which magazine are you having? Yeah, you're having an editorial expose.
Yeah. In March in a Chicago design magazine.
Oh, nice. Anything else you want to talk about? Oh, in the Slow Gallery here in Chicago, you're doing a collaborative with Matthew Gearson, right?
Gearson, that's right. And fantastic. Material is closed right now, for obvious reasons, and but we'll be opening up with some new exciting shows. You can see the upcoming shows on materialexhibitions.com. We've got Nancy Wisty-Grayson, Shona Pryor, Lauren Leving is also curating, Michael Lopez.
Fantastic. So here's some questions. So we got two questions coming up. So in the process of co-creation, how much agency does Derek as an artist facilitator have vis-a-vis their collaborators community? Where does he draw that line? That was one question we got. Want me to repose that, or you got it?
No, I mean, I understand the
Oh,
right. I don't know that I have decided what the line is. It's really hard because, well, I don't know. I keep asking people, like, when we collaborate, like, what do you need to get out of that experience? Even from a financial standpoint, because I am aware that, like, some of the collaborative work may be me playing on the beach or watching two other queer folks just play on the beach in, like, garments that I've either made or that I've created, or that's the same thing, sorry, or that I've, like, found in antique shops. And that image could sell at Jefferson's gallery for way more than like their like what, like it can just like make a profit from my practice in a way that they probably deserve like some kickback for. And I keep asking people more and more in their collaborative agency, like, what is it you need out of this? And like, can I be more generous in the thing that you gain from this? And oftentimes people do the humble thing and they're like, no, I don't need anything. But I don't know, like I'm always keeping like a stash of something, like even it's like a stash of prints that I can just like give someone in case they just need something to hang on to. And that's just like one way I'm thinking about expanding what like co-performance vernacular and compensation looks like. As I don't know, I do author a lot of work, but I oftentimes, like I even think Jefferson, one time we were possibly going to get an article and I was like, here are the 13, 15 people who are a part of this project. Yep. You know, and I was like, here's every single.
I just want you to know that I presented it. I presented that list to them. I had a moment where I wasn't going to, because I thought, are they going to print this? But I presented it.
You know, and it was like, I want every single person to at least have their name on it if they want their name on it. And if people don't want their name on it, like their agency, I try to be as equitable as I can, and I'm sure I fail a lot. Yeah.
And then Adia, you had one question, right?
I did, yes. I actually had two come in. The first question that we got was actually for you, Jefferson.
Okay.
And more so about how you decide to work with artists and that process. I mean, we like to think of curating as an administrative act, sure, but there's also this phenomenal creative component to it. So if you could just dive into that a little bit, we'd love to hear from you.
In the context of the gallery, it oftentimes would relate to, I mean, as you can see, I'm friends with Jean and Derek. I enjoy working with people that I like, and also that their work challenges me. I also really like work that I'm growing from that constantly is asking me questions. So I don't like everything to be so packaged and clear. I like there to be ambiguities and inconsistencies, or not inconsistencies in the work, but ambiguities, I guess, more. That's more fascinating to me. I also, for me, performance is a huge important aspect to my practice, and something that I've been, and video art, which obviously, I guess they run tandem with one another.
Oh, can I answer the question that Alice asked in the chat? So because Antenna does have an actual residency program that they kind of shut down because of the pandemic, and I somehow am a ridiculous human being who's not scared to just reach out to random people and say like, hey, Chicago's going to have 20 inches of snow this winter and be -20, which I saw coming. Can I please come and make work in this community that I really want to invest my time in? And so Antenna allowed me to come, and is more an independent study or visiting artist position in the back of their gallery. And so I'm just like staying in the back of the gallery and then going out in the world and making artwork for 2 months. And then the other place, which we're sort of in contract with, so maybe I shouldn't, we finalized kind of this week, but I'll be staying at this organization in downtown New Orleans. Is actually a hotel, and they normally do an artist in residency program in the summertime. And because a friend of mine who goes to Tulane at the moment did the program, I reached out to them and said, hey, I'm still working on this work. Like Jefferson said, trying to do a lot in 2 months. Like I can't, can I please stay until April? And they were like, yes, we'd love, I got bourbons with the guy. I showed up in like some type of like, I showed up in like one of these, you know, and I was just like, can we talk about how I'd like to stay for 2 more months, you know? And so we did that. And I'm really fortunate that I think that actually just got figured out this week. So that'll be in downtown.
That's great.
And they've sort of, also the room they made is great. So if you're an artist and you want to know about this in like a week or so, when I sign the paperwork and sign it, I'm happy to say more. But I got into the hotel room, And it's like a room made for an artist. So it's sort of like not a normal hotel room. It's like the sort of like bunk beddy sort of space. And I literally didn't fit in the bed. And he was like, that's not going to be a problem. We're going to put you in a queen size bed across the hallway and you can use this as your studio. And I was like, oh my God, like let the retrograde continue, you know, like just let the energy in the universe just be what it is. So it's all been good things.
And Alice also had a question for Jean. Would you be kind enough to respond to that, Jean?
Yeah, Alice.
Can you read it?
If you are a painter, allowing the unexpected to happen in your canvases is risk taking. And yeah, thank you. I mean, I actually do think that that when I was saying that I question whether a painting should exist or not, I was thinking about some of the paintings that I made that were dealing with gravity and letting them fall on the ground and having them still be paintings. So maybe it didn't come across that well, but yeah, I appreciate that that you talked about the risk taking and the kind of questions about structure and play and freedom within that. And I think there's a lot of juicy little bits that are still there to grab. So yeah, I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
I just quickly, I know we're running out of time, but I just put a couple of those paintings that Jean was just referring to up here. I'm not the host, but Adia, you're the host, of course, but it's been such a wonderful opportunity to connect with you both. And I'm so thankful that you're so gracious to open up so much here in this virtual platform. It was such a wonderful experience. And you've enlivened my otherwise freezing Thursday night. So thank you both so much. And thank you so much, Adia, for organizing and inviting this. This was such a pleasure.
You're so welcome. Thank you to you, Jefferson, Jean, Derek. Oh my gosh, it has been such a rich discussion. Like I mentioned, this is a monthly program. We'll ask another curator, artist, pairing, duo, trio to come and talk about their work. Feel free to follow 21C Chicago on social media, our newsletter, to stay informed about what's going on. We also did just reopen our museum space for reservations. So if you would like to come by and see our current exhibition entitled This We Believe, feel free to follow the link that I just slipped into the chat. Didn't know I was doing that, did you? But again, thank you so much for joining us for our first curator conversation. Massive thank you to you three. And I hope you all stay warm. Enjoy the rest of your night and your evening.
Thanks everyone for sticking around. Jean, I love you. You're great.
Love you, everyone. Bye.
Wow.
Thank you.
Great, Jefferson, you're great. Well, have a good night.
Have a great night. Thank you both so much. And Adia too. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Ciao.
Bye.
See ya.